to the studio commentary for the feature film The Trees Have Names. My name is Jennifer DeMarco, and I'm the writer and director of The Trees Have Names.
And I'm Brianne DeMarco, and I was the editor, and I arranged the music, and I was assistant director sometimes. I did some of the cinematography, depending on if we had tricky shots.
Yeah, I think this is one of the films where we have 2 or 3, which is rare for Blue Forge Films. We have 2 or 3 camera people actually credited in the credits. I had forgotten that we had so many different locations, and some of it was night shooting and some of it was on sets as opposed to in real locations, which makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely.
If it's a set that we're putting together, literally building like in a black box space, it's obviously lit completely differently than say what we're working with when we're shooting in an actual office, an actual hallway,
an actual house.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. That's a very good point.
That's one of the huge things in the film is the house that we filmed in is all one house. The bedrooms that we see are bedrooms in the house. The bathroom and the kitchen and the living room and the dining room and outside the house. All of it is the house. Whereas if you take Weathermore, the institution, the exterior is one location, and then the white room, the room that Tori's in when she's small and we see her grow, it's Kylie, and then Kylie becomes Faith, and then Faith becomes Lana, who is the grown-up Tori. And they're all in this white room, and that's actually a completely separate location that is 100 feet behind us.
Yeah, it's actually on
the campus,
the Blue Forge campus. So it is like a black box space.
And it was curious because I even saw a shot. There's a shot where, and I can't tell you which Tori it was, but Kaiser, who was played by James Rowland, is leaving that room. And I was going back over everything before we held the director's cut premiere. And I was like, oh, you can see behind him, but not really because it's just black. It's just dark because we were filming at night. So it looks like he's just going out into like a deep dark hallway or something. You can't actually tell. But in reality, if it was daytime right then, you would just see forest because the room, that is the whole building. It's just that room. And the door that opens, it opens to the forest. Which is, I don't know, I thought that was kind of cool and interesting. And there's also interior shots of Weathermore where you see the adult Tori wandering around. She's looking at the garden, she's outside, and then she goes inside, and then it's a grand staircase. We're in a completely new location again.
Yes, the grand staircase and the library.
So the exterior and the inside of Tori's new room, that was one location. The library, the grand staircase, there's like some long white halls. Stacy's character, I'm trying to remember her name.
It's okay. This is something that actually I was going to bring up with folks. Is that, we don't refer to the actors that we work with by their character names because, well, first of all, they play tons of different characters because we like to use a lot of the same people here at Blue Forge Films.
Dr. Riley.
Yes,
Barbara Riley.
So it's interesting because we'll just say, Stacy in The Trees Have Names, and it's fun because people say you wrote it, you don't know the names, and I'm like, no, guys, I've written literally more than 100 films, and Stacy will always be Stacy to me. No matter how much she embodies another character, I'm always going to think of her as Stacy because she doesn't. People talk about, I become the character. And I'm like, well, that's okay. But to me, you're always going to be you as an individual.
Sure.
And I want to keep that in mind because I know that our actors, maybe they are vegan or maybe they are incredibly dedicated and passionate. But boy, after 9 p.m., you don't want to have them on set because they're exhausted. I always try to think of them as people first. But go ahead. So yes, then the hallways and the grand staircase, the library, that was one. I want to say there was another.
Yeah, I just found it very interesting, the difference between filming in the house, where all of it was just the house, and then when we were dealing with Weathermore was several different locations, all kind of wrapped up, and we tried to create it into one.
The exterior of Weathermore, the gardens, and like that covered trellis area, and the suite that adult Tori winds up in once Dr. Riley takes over Weathermore, that was all at one location.
Right.
Which is like, yeah, it's like interesting, like a little piecemeal. And I don't know if we've ever had something that elaborate. But I mean, Weathermore is a very elaborate
it's
location.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not even near each other. We were all over Washington for that.
Yeah.
So that was, I did really enjoy. That was actually really exciting. And yet, to me, it stayed completely believable. Because that massive building looks like it could contain all of that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So today what we're going to do is, instead of watching the film and critiquing it scene by scene or something like that, Brianne and I were going to talk about the parts of the film that maybe folks might have missed, or they might be interested in little behind the scenes type things. One of the things that I wanted to start with was this film was co-produced with Beginning of Heaven Studios, and Beginning of Heaven Studios is owned by the woman who played the adult Tori, Lana Sorensen. And I believe this was one of the projects that Beginning of Heaven Studios came to us and said, will you build a vehicle, a powerful vehicle where Lana can really show her acting chops? And the film kind of was built up around that. Thrillers weren't really, even psychological thrillers weren't really something that we were actively engaging in.
No.
We tend to be a little bit, there's some kind of chaos going on in the other room. We tend to do things that are very cerebral and that are a little experimental, that ask a lot of questions that don't neatly tie up.
Dramas.
Yes, tend to be dramas. Yeah. And I just absolutely adore the director's cut of this film. I love the way it turned out. But I think for a genre that we don't normally work in, I really like, I really do. I really like the way it turned out. And I think that your music, and this is another interesting thing that folks may not know, Brianne works almost exclusively, and by that I mean she's the person that I turn to score original music, to create original music for my films. She's who I trust. And that's a really big decision. It's a very pointed decision for me, because I've worked with composers. I've worked with, as they say, Hollywood, big budget composers on a couple of projects early on when everyone was pushing us to hire staff outside of Blue Forge Films and, get more variety or whatever. And I just could not stand. The people were fine. The composers were fine people, but I didn't like what they were turning in at all. And I would say, is there feedback? Can I say anything? And they were like, sure, yeah. And then they turn in their revision. And to me, it was like, this is the same. Okay. And I was not willing to give up control or say into the music. And yet I wanted a composer who felt that they could express themselves. So I found myself in this quandary. So what I realized I actually had to do as a filmmaker is find a composer who sees my stories the way I see them. Now, I don't even think Brianne and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think Brianne and I particularly talk about the score, about the soundtrack, before I hand you a film and say, do what you will with it. I can't wait to hear it. And I can't remember the last time I had any feedback or revision notes or anything like that. But this project was so unique because of schedule and just the way this one turned out. Brianne was arranging music written by other people into the film, and yet still, I love the score. I think the score turned out great. I don't think it's as good as your original soundtracks, Sound and Silence or Pages of a Book, but Black Bishop Red Queen, but My Wyvern Heart, which you just won a Best Shorts Competition award for as Best Composer. So congratulations. So I think that was kind of an interesting thing, because that was different for us. Doing a feature film, not different. The genre, different. So many locations. Such a massive scope of time. Actually, that's not too unusual for us, is it? We often have films that will, a lot of time will pass.
If it's necessary for the story, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, it's not the first time we've seen someone as a child and as an adult.
No, and actually it's not the first time that we've seen Kylie and Lana play a child and an adult. They also played a child and adult in House of Sound and Sea.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So that is a common thing for us. I don't think we've ever seen a character as a child, a teen, and an adult. I don't think we've ever done that.
No, I don't think so.
But, and also we've seen Maxwell play a teen version and then have an adult. So it's like, it's interesting. We've done that a couple of different times.
Yeah.
But I think that the other major thing that I always think about when I think about The Trees Have Names, maybe I'm not trying to say that all of the other actors weren't phenomenal and they aren't all on my mind when I think of the film, but that very early on in the process, completely unsolicited, I got a message over social media from another director in Washington who said, "Oh, I heard on the grapevine," or whatever that phrase is, "that you were hiring Daryl Robert Small in a lead dramatic role. And I just want to save you frustration. There's no way he can't take direction. He can't do a dramatic role. He is a character actor, pure comedy. That's it."
Which I would say probably speaks to their directing skill rather than his acting skill, because he nailed this role.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think he took direction wonderfully.
There was a quality that was necessary in the actor who played John. He needed to connect with his granddaughter because the love that he has for her is real. No matter what happens, what Tori finds out in the film, the love that he had for her was always real.
Yeah.
And so they connected. And we keep flashing back to them at dinner, the day when everything happens, when Tori finds what's in the garage and her little mind is trying to put the pieces together, and that's the day that her mind kind of breaks because she just can't take it.
Yeah.
And the connection that Daryl and Kylie have in that scene is so real and so fun and silly, and we needed that because if we had a lead actor come into that role who was just serious and morose and dark all the time, because he's like, well, I'm a child serial killer.
Right.
So I've got this deep darkness. Yes, that character has that, but he also is a grandpa. He also really loves Tori. And Daryl brought that. And I think that there's a lot of actors we would have brought into the role that would have lost that.
I agree with you 100%. I think that I know that there are parts of the film that go over people's heads, and I totally accept that and embrace that, but that's the kind of film that I like.
Absolutely.
And I understand also that that's very unusual, especially for American cinema. But I feel like on repeated viewings, little gems kind of float to the surface.
Oh, I would hope so.
And I think that some of those moments in that scene where we keep flashing back, she's running a bath, that she's out of bubbles, and later how he finds the empty bubbles, and there's this moment that Daryl has, and it's literally just him on screen. He doesn't even say anything. And he picks up that empty bottle, and it's kind of like, you wonder, as a viewer, when I saw it after, so many years between original release and the director's cut release, there's this moment where he's just looking at that empty bottle going, she was out of bubble bath. And, it's like you can see it on his face. Did she come to look for me? To ask me if we have more bubble bath? Did she follow me into the garage? Was the door closed behind me? Did I lock it like normal? I mean, it's like he really took that moment. I think a lot of actors, they're so rushing to get to the next line or the next movement that they don't just, and I've run into this a lot, and I know I come to you and I complain, I go, oh, I need to become a better director, is someone's facial expressions will be over the top. And when that unsolicited advice came to me from that Washington director, I thought to myself, I understand where you're coming from. I've had actors like that on set, but I don't I don't believe that this role is going to call for that. And like you said, I have to be a fair and articulate and a tough enough director sounds stupid, but just a director. And I think if your actors don't respect you enough to take your direction, and we've run into that. You have been on set with me when I will be giving direction and an actor, I'll give direction to like actor A, and actor B will like lean in and give them like some kind of little advice, and I'll be like, excuse me, you're not the director.
Well, ultimately, I think they'd probably like to direct.
Right, yes, right, yes, exactly. And I think that's, so I mean, like I knew, okay, yeah, all right, that's a potential pitfall in this area, but I just don't believe that's going to happen. And I really don't believe that's a reason not to give someone a role. I think that is wrong, 100% wrong. I also think that a lot of American cinema with a story like The Trees Have Names, they would have rushed the child Tory parts. Not even had the teen Tory part.
Yeah, I think they might have just stayed with her being an adult and done like flashbacks.
Yes,
and
only
stuff.
the flashbacks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I want that slow burn. I want this believable, and I need
that's
to
for
believe.
Me,
yeah,
I really love the slow burn. You know, one of my favorite films is an Australian film called Sleeping Beauty. It stars Emily Browning, and it is the slowest burn you'll ever find.
Yeah.
And you get to the end, and you're just like, wait, that's it?
right.
And it's just been this slow burn, and you keep watching and waiting,
so unique.
And taking in what's happening, and then it's over, and you're like, that's where it ends. And I love that, and that's what I see with this film. Is
thank you.
There's a lot more in that it is a psychological thriller. So it has times where you're just like, oh, this is dark, or this is wow, that's really a lot, a lot. But at the same time, we also have these moments, especially once Tori is in the new room at Weathermore. That's actually like a room, not like a big, not big, but a small white box.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of moments of her just being and her thinking and her sitting. She's watching, she's looking outside, she's looking out the window, which she hasn't done in 15 years.
Right.
But it's a lot of just these moments of just being with her, because that's all she is. That's all she's doing.
Absolutely.
Is just existing. And so we exist in those moments almost in real time with her.
And I felt that Lana did a fantastic job. I would definitely like to go on record to say that. I think that she embodied and never rushed. She embodied Tori, meaning like this little girl hasn't had freedom since she was a little girl.
Yeah.
So how you have to take that mentality and then, okay, whatever trauma put her there in the first place, and then just the trauma of being there under Kaiser.
Right.
And now you have to make that person an adult. What kind of adult would that person be? Well, they're not going to be a well-balanced, mature.
Well, no, and in a lot of ways.
She's going to be reckless. She's going to be, I mean, all those things that I think, yes, we're in the script, but I do believe that Lana brought those things to the character.
Well, in a lot of ways, she hasn't actually grown up yet.
Absolutely.
And so we see her, and when she's first talking to Dr. Riley, Stacy's character, she's still very much a child. She speaks like a child, and she acts like a child, and she's just like, you know, Riley gives her a lot of good answers about why she's the head psychiatrist now. And Tori's just like, okay.
Yeah.
She just like several of the things have actually gone over her head, and she was just asking a question, but any answer was an okay answer, and she's just like, okay.
Yeah.
And she's just kind of like, you know, in her own world. And then you see those glimpses of that, like, that little bit of defiant Tori, which was like the teenage Tori that we saw Faith play.
Yeah.
Where she doesn't get what she wants. But it's like, at no point do we actually see her be an adult. We see her she's either in this, like, very childlike stage, or she seems like when she gets upset when she doesn't get her way, when Riley says, okay, we're gonna skip a day. And she's just like,
yeah.
And then immediately she starts poking. She's like, you're married.
Yep.
You're not wearing a ring, but there's a mark. You're not divorced.
Yeah.
And she starts poking at her.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that is Faith. That is the teen Tori.
Mm-hmm.
That's her talking to Kaiser and telling...
The rebellion, the pushback.
And her saying good morning, and he says good afternoon. She's like, well, I don't have a watch.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to tell the time. And she's very, like, it's not surface. It's all a lot of, like, undercurrents of defiance and of those little pokes.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly she's able to poke at him, and so she tries the same thing on Riley. And we see it works on Riley, because then she's watching her outside. And that I found to be...
And Riley's shaken.
And it's a very interesting dynamic, because at that point in the film, me as a viewer, I'm like, oh, are we supposed to see, is Tori going to be dangerous? Is Tori going to go after her? Is this going to turn into, like, some, like, weird obsessive thing, and then she, like, hurts her or something? And we don't go down that path.
No.
But that the question is there, I find very intriguing. Because there is this little, like, seed of, I could see Tori going down a different path.
Yes, I think she could have. I think
Shows, like, the depth of that character, which is good.
No, I love that.
I just love.
I love that. I'm just gonna let Brienne do the Empire commentary, because, like, that's super cool and insightful. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and just psychologically, the things that young woman, that child and that young woman has faced, she could very well have done that. That could very well have happened.
Well, and you see the potential for that.
Yeah, you really
and I
do.
think if she had kept a doctor that was more like, not necessarily Kaiser, because I think in so many ways he is just too harsh. So I think that there is no real growth from him.
Yeah.
There's no way to go forward. There's just, he takes everything away and Tori throws tantrums, and that's what it is. But I think a doctor like him, we could have seen Tori go in that direction and become manipulative and unstable and have the potential for that kind of danger.
I agree. Yeah. I think that one of the reasons why I feel like we get to be so connected to Tori, and why we can really say, oh, she could have gone this way, she could have gone that way, is because we did get to stay with her for so long. You know, Kylie, Faith, and Lana, they did such an excellent job, building this character from literally a little girl, onward. When we held the director's cut premiere, all the cast and crew, we posted on all of our social media, because, it had been several years, and so, like, we didn't even have contact information for most of the folks, and so we posted, like, on all of the social media, we were like, okay, you guys, this is an online premiere, because it was taking place in July of 2020. And, like, people, come, and there's a live chat before and a live chat after. And two of the questions that came up in the live chat after were, one was, why is Benjamin Cousaud's character, let's see, Brienne's going to be better with the name. Is it Dev? Dev. Why is John mad at Dev when Dev leaves the force and hires someone new, a new police chief, finds a replacement?
I would say that I could answer that.
And it was very interesting, because I was in the live chat, so it's like I answered it one way, but I even said in that live chat, I would be interested to hear what some of the other folks involved with the film, how they would answer that.
To me, I would say it's kind of a dual answer. I think there's two layers. I think there's a surface layer and then a very deep layer. The very deep layer, I think, is kind of gross and insidious. The deep layer is, I think John knew that Dev couldn't solve it. And so if Dev stayed in charge of the police force, it would stay unsolved. Because as soon as Dev steps down and replaces himself with this other man that he's found from the big city, the murders stop. The children stop going missing. Because John knows that this man could find him and could figure it out if they keep happening. If things stop, that's always like, oh, have they moved on? Are they somewhere else? Is something different? What's happening? So I think the deep level, the insidious and pretty icky level, is he was angry because he said, I picked you. He picked him to lead the police force. You would think if John's doing, he's kidnapping children and boiling them and I would argue what's shown in the film is he's then feeding them to him and Kylie. He's feeding Tori.
Yeah.
And that he would pick Dev, that means that he knows that Dev wouldn't catch him. Because if there was any chance that Dev might catch him, he wouldn't do it.
Absolutely.
So that's to me like the real deep down rooted, I'm angry because now I have to stop, and now I could be found out. Now he's never found out in the scope of what we see.
Yeah.
But I think the surface level, the level that I get on the first viewing when you don't know what's happening, you don't know that the grandpa's the big bad.
Right.
The surface level to me is, I picked you, I put you in charge. This is my department. This is
legacy.
My legacy.
This was my legacy that
and
I gave
picked
to
you. I put you in charge because I knew you could handle it.
Yeah.
And you would keep things good and above board, and I put you in charge, and why are you leaving? You're just, who knows what's going to happen now.
And you couldn't handle it.
Yes, and because it's not John's best friend Dev, he has this super, super tight and intimate platonic relationship with.
Yes.
Which is a whole nother subject. I totally lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay.
I had it and then it was gone.
Well, you made some really good points.
Let me think.
Okay.
There's an earthquake upstairs.
I don't know if you guys can hear that. We're in the Blue Door studio in the Blue Room on the Blue Forge campus, and there's a floor above us, and there are studios also around. So
John picked Dev, and Dev is his best friend, and they have this super, super tight, very intimate, platonic relationship. And I think in some ways, John felt like he still had control over the precinct.
Yes.
That he had control over, even though he had stepped down as the police chief, there was still a level of control. He could be like, Dev, you really should be, and so you are still, you're on the shoulder of the person in charge. You're whispering in their ear, and that's gone. So on a base level, on a deep, dark, creepy, gross, I don't think you can catch me level.
Yeah. And I think that
he was really upset, and I think betrayed. He seemed very betrayed.
Yes, and the question that came right after that is about that same scene.
Okay, yes.
And that is, why is young Tori so angry at Dev?
Right, why does Tori attack Dev?
Yeah, and I'm like, again, if you're taking it from this insidious space, which, I agree with both of what you said, and those are, to me, you and I believe very strongly that stories and literature, stories should not be deconstructed. People should not be told what to think.
No, I think people should talk about them and talk about what they mean to them.
So anything that we're saying here isn't like it's saying
our
this is the one answer. You could say, but like, you're the writer and you're the editor. But you're the watcher. And the watchers get to take away a completely different subtext, a completely different everything, if you so desire. This is just us sharing this part with you. Because again, many things that we're both very passionate about, but this is something that we're both very passionate about. And from my perspective, she was angry for it's like almost like two sides of the same coin. Because she was like, Dev, you should solve this. Yeah. It's right in front of your face, man. Right. Don't you love me?
Yeah, no, I think
you're like a big brother or my uncle or,
Like surface level, I see it as you and my grandpa, because I think at that point, John has talked about Tori regressing and she's back to plastic dishes. She's breaking all her crayons. It's very young behavior.
Yeah.
Very, very regressed young behavior. And so that to me says, it's very surface. They're yelling at each other and that's my grandpa. Don't yell at my grandpa. Yeah, you're Dev, whatever. Fine.
Yeah.
But that's my grandpa. And if you're yelling at him, then she's not using words. So she uses her body. She uses her fist. She's angry and she wants to protect him.
Bites Dev or scratches him or something.
Yeah. And then the surface, I think, is exactly, or not the surface, what's deep. And I would argue Tori's subconscious, that she doesn't even know, just standing there being upset, is Dev was the hope. Dev could solve it. Dev could figure out it was Grandpa, and then I can go live with Dev and everything will be okay.
Oh my gosh.
You know, because like Dev is the only other adult she really has in her life. We never see her with a teacher. We know that there are teachers because Dev's wife was a teacher, and he talks about Tori at school and that kind of thing. But there's no teacher that seems to be the most important to Tori.
Yeah.
She just talks about, you know, what Dev's wife has said.
Yeah, what she's overheard.
Because she's constantly hearing adults talking, which I think especially for a kiddo who is an only child, that is, I mean, you're surrounded by adults, and adults are talking, and you're just taking in what you're hearing.
Yeah.
But Dev is like, it's John and Dev. You know, it's like, again, without any kind of like a romantic relationship, it's like Tori's two dads.
Oh yeah. Oh yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Because like Dev has stepped into this pseudo uncle, you know, like Full House.
Yes.
You know, Danny and the two uncles. You know, they're taking care of the kids because the mom has died.
Okay.
You know, so it's like these three guys taking care of all these kids, and you know, it's the same thing. Everything's very platonic, and you know, no one's in a relationship or anything. But these are the two people, the two adults in her life that are important. And I think she's just like, you know, you've given up. And also there's been clearly time that's passed between when he left the force and when he's actually showing up, because he knows that John and Tori are leaving that day.
Right.
But this is the first time they're seeing each other since that's happened. So we have cues in that conversation that this time has passed and Dev's been afraid to come to John. And he's literally coming at the last possible moment. Although John does also watch him approach and watch him and watch him. And then when Dev goes to get out of the car, John's like, oh, I'm going to get in the front seat.
Right.
And I'm like, you were just standing there watching him approach. You could have driven away by now. Clearly you want that confrontation.
Exactly. You're conflicted.
You're trying not to. But yet you waited until he got out of the car to decide to leave.
Yeah. Like when you're really angry at your best adult, you know, and as an adult.
Yeah.
So not as a child, not as a teen.
Right.
But as an adult, when you're really, really angry at your best friend, but you still want them in your life. You still want them as your best friend. And I think
I think they both have things that needed to be said.
Absolutely.
Was that the most, you know, opportune time?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No, right. Yeah.
Maybe not when we're already in this very emotionally heavy place of I'm bringing my granddaughter to
be committed.
A psychiatric institute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I told myself I was going to absolutely do in this commentary was I was going to do a Jennifer Explains It All moment. But even though we have already said some spoilers, I did want to really stress that what I am about to do will absolutely destroy the film. If you are watching the commentary,
you haven't watched the film,
please stop.
I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if you're new to film. That's okay. Stop. I've already told you everything that's going to happen.
Yeah, but
because I was trying to allude, and then I was like, it's the commentary. You're not going to watch the commentary and then watch the film. Go watch the film.
Yeah.
Go.
But, so basically, all
that's
of...
what Neil does, right?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
And then turn on the film.
Basically, all of these elements are in the film, but one of the I'm not saying I am like this filmmaker. That's not the kind of person I am. But one of the filmmakers that I very much like the way his stories are constructed is David Lynch. And I understand that that's actually, I've only recently learned that that's kind of a controversial thing to say, because people say, you either like absolutely despise his films, or you're like, oh my gosh, this film is like the best I've ever seen. Mulholland Drive was one of my, I consider it one of my top 5 favorite films, which probably says way more about me than it does about David Lynch. But I think there's a sad puppy in the other room.
Why are you a sad puppy?
Hi, sad puppy.
Hi, sad puppy. Come here.
There you go. All right.
He's
So-
a sad puppy.
Noodle is here to do all the spoilers. Okay, so first of all, to me, I love that Brienne referred to John as the big bad, and the funny thing is that I've never thought of him as the big bad, even though she's absolutely right, he is. For me, the story, if I had to put it into, it's in non-linear. We see it in a non-linear way. But if I was to put it into a linear timeline, that timeline would be John lost his wife unexpectedly. John had one child, his daughter. He lost his daughter when she was an adult and had a baby, his first and only grandchild, Tori, in a freak car accident with a major manufacturing malfunction. The accelerator stuck, and both his only daughter and her husband were lost. And again, we see these things
Yeah.
in the film.
Yeah, Sarah and Mark.
Yes, Sarah and Mark. See, Brienne, you're excellent with names. And John then came to be, the sole guardian of his granddaughter. When John lost his daughter, John broke. I think he was worn thin by the loss of his wife, but when he lost his daughter, he broke. And what saved him was having Tori in his life. And he, in his mind, came to this space where he's like, oh, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but to an extreme that is just so extreme and so wrong. And that is losing someone who is precious to us puts all of life into perspective, and we then can recover. And so we hear John at one point talking to Dev about this horrific thing that has happened to the wife of one of their fellow officers, and how the officer is who breaks, if I'm remembering
Yes.
everything correctly. And they're talking about this, and John has a couple of almost, in quotes, throwaway lines where he's talking about what makes people stronger, and you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is John knows this small town community. He is the police chief. He loves this community. Every time he sees a perceived weakness or struggle in a family in the community, he says, I know what they need to make them stronger. I'm going to take one of their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to abduct that kid. And, again, he's broken, guys. He is, as Brian says, the big bad.
No, I mean, there's...
I'm not trying to create compassion for, a serial killer. But he takes, Noodle is
No, but
rubbing
but
her little face on the carpet, you guys. It's pretty cute.
One of the things that I like very much about your writing is that even your characters that are the big bad or are intrinsically flawed or whatever, they have reasons for it. They're not two-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
John isn't two-dimensional. He's not just up in one day decided I'm going to go and kidnap children and kill them and eat them.
Yeah.
He has a reason.
Yeah.
No,
And
there's
thinks
no
he's
justification for what he's doing.
No.
But he has a reason.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think the whole eating them, I really played with it both ways. One, it was, again, from John's riddled brain, him thinking, if when we consume something, it continues to be, it becomes part of us, so is it really murder? But I also just think he very well knew it was a way to get rid of all of the evidence that could be traced back to him. But I think it was some of both of those things. So what happens then is this is going on, and there is a little boy who we see in the film, Frankie, who that is fantastic that you did that.
I just did the captions on the whole film.
Oh, that's true.
I know
So
everyone's
typing
name.
everyone's names.
It's it'll take me a minute, but I could probably
Frankie,
remember.
who is in the same class as young Tori, and he comes over for them to basically have a play date, and he starts to say to Tori, I think one of two things. Either your grandpa is like the worst police chief that's like ever existed, or Noodle, did you need help?
Yeah, she got 2 of her little nails crossed, and so she couldn't walk on her foot. She's
girl.
You're silly.
Or
To fix her
I
toes.
think your grandpa is the big bad, and Tori gets mad. Tori gets mad, and she, you know, kind of freaks out about that. But then Frankie disappears. Frankie becomes a victim of this, you know, serial killer. It is only when, and that shakes Tori. Okay, so now we're starting to shake Tori. So first she loses her mom and dad. Then, you know, she has years with her grandpa. Things seem to be going well, but like the serial killer thing is happening. It's a lot of kids from her class, but it's also just kids, you know, that she knows. It's not a very big town.
Well, and the breaking point does seem to be about Frankie.
Yes.
Because we hear her upset saying Frankie wasn't at school today.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and it's like, and she knows, you know, on some level she knows it's her friend, and her friend is now gone.
And of course, as we see in the film in the flashbacks, when she truly snaps with reality, as opposed to just being like really shaken, like in a mental health way, you know, like, yikes, is when she follows her grandpa into the forbidden garage where it's always locked, and the grandpa says, well, it's locked to keep the dog safe. Yeah. But, you know, the dog is like, followed him, and you see the mat outside the door to the garage has caught in the door, and so the door didn't lock behind John when he went in. Tori goes in there. Ooh, the garage is like this little forbidden zone. It's so cool. And she sees the children in the cages. She then runs out into the woods, and at that point we start to see Tori hallucinating. And Tori pretty much hallucinates for the rest of the film. Yeah. She is the ultimate unreliable narrator in that what she sees as reality is shaped by her ability to try to, or lack of ability to try to process what she has seen and what she's trying to wrap her mind around and understand. Now, so there's that story. Then we get to the part of the film that was literally added in production. And that is...
Biscuit, what are you doing, honey? Another dog appears.
Hey.
Sometimes we're jealous.
We'll just take it from here? Okay. Okay. So, originally, the way the film was scripted is that Dr. Riley takes over Tori's care. Eventually, she introduces the virtual headset to try to deal with trauma. And by doing that, Tori is able to unlock these memories of being a child, and you know, and seeing these traumatic things, and the truth is revealed, and John is brought to justice, etc. The way the film,
right, and we also get we get kind of a 2-level of Tori thinks that she remembers, and so then she's released. She meets Aaron, who's played by Ashley, and you know, we see, and then they have a baby, they get engaged, and then we find out that Ashley's pregnant, and then they have the baby, and they're bringing the baby to John, and then Tori really remembers.
Right.
See, so we have that kind of that 2-level of like, she's like, I remember, but really the twist there is, then she really remembers. She remembers not only was it too much everything that was going on, all of the kids that were missing at school, and Frankie and everything. Yeah. But she actually remembers the real thing that broke her.
Truly buried.
Once Ashley, Aaron, played by Ashley, Aaron says, how many dogs did you guys have? And then she looks and she sees the kennels, and then we really get the flashback of like the real trauma and that whole incident.
But during the massive scope of this production, we're talking with the cast. Brianne and I are talking a lot at the end of every shooting day. And we're like, there's no way. If Dr. Riley is supposed to be this therapist based on some of the best therapists, you know, we've ever known, and just really connected, and you know, isn't gonna let Tori push her buttons or trap her in some of these ways, she would not let Tori have so much freedom so quickly. Tori would snap again. Maybe she would wind up going down a violent path. So in the course of the production, we decided, okay, actually, after the day that Dr. Riley comes in and gives Tori clothes, is it? Does she have clothes
It
by
actually
that point?
is that day.
It's that same day.
It is, which I can't remember if that's the first day or the second day, but it's the day when she comes in with the clothes.
So Tori
because
as an adult is still in the white room.
There's a flicker of, you can see the headset, and then the
Yes.
headset's gone again.
It is actually that day that Dr. Riley explains to her about the headset, puts the headset on her and goes, okay, I'm going to guide you through this. You're going to appear in this forest, and then I'm going to guide you through all of this trauma. The whole rest of the film
is in VR.
It's all in Tori's head in this program that Dr. Riley has designed for her. So that
Letting
amazing
her
sweet
take all of those steps forward of,
Yes.
okay, so all right, so imagine you at home with your grandpa.
Right.
Right? Okay, and then
Yeah.
you go out and you get a job, and then you meet somebody, and you
That's
guys have a
right.
baby.
That's right. What
all
would that
of these
person be
things.
like?
And
What would the job be?
Right, exactly. And to put into her head, okay, now that you have a baby, now do you remember?
Yes, and
Because
like
now there's a different
constant
priority, and the baby is with the grandpa. You know, it's like those kind of things.
Yes.
Which none of that obviously is explained because you don't understand until the end that
Right.
actually those scenes are in VR. And
Sorry,
with
go ahead.
Dev.
Yes.
With Dev at Weathermore.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Dev, who's become like who's
seems to be the
Hi.
on-call priest.
yeah, seems to be the on-call priest at
who
Weathermore.
I will have to say, on my first couple times of seeing the film, I thought was a patient at Weathermore.
Oh wow!
I thought that's what he had said.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I caught in a lot when I was doing the captions, the last time that I watched it, when he says there wasn't a chapel before Dr. Riley.
Right.
And that's when I was like, oh, he's literally there as the priest, not
Right.
as he's been a priest, but he needed some time. Because that's how I had seen it, is that he had, he's like, I didn't know I would take the cloth. He becomes a priest, he finds this incredible, he refines his faith, I would argue.
Right, yeah.
Because we see him, he's praying when he's trying to find Tori.
Yeah.
I mean, he is like not taking the name in vain. Dear God, please don't do this to John again.
Yes.
So we see him have faith. He loses his faith. He verbalizes that to John. We see him with his faith again. And I have, and I guess you could argue the interpretation that, yes, there wasn't a chapel before then.
Right.
But that doesn't mean necessarily that Dev's the on-call priest. It could still mean that he needed some time there, and he finds solace in going to the chapel.
Absolutely.
Because he's a priest, and because he has faith, and because that is what he relies on.
So this and that change, the fact that it wasn't. So what you really have to do is you have to watch the film again, and you have to stop the second time Dr. Riley comes into the white room.
If you
don't see the flicker at that point, it's not there. It's when we revisit that moment later in the film, isn't it? Is it there?
No, it's there.
I'll see.
The first time that she sits down, she's sitting down, and I can't remember entirely what the exchanges are, but she's sitting down, there's clothes between them, but Tori has not changed into the clothes. She's still in the white scrubs.
Your editor will always know your film better than you. Just respect that.
And Tori becomes upset, and she starts to kind of rock, and she starts to cry, and Barbara goes to reach out to her, and as she's reaching out, we see a flicker of, and then in her hand is the headset, and then her hand continues, and she's going to, I think, reach out just to put an arm on, a hand on Tori's shoulder, because she's in such a state. But the idea is that in that moment, in Tori in this state, that she reaches forward and she puts the headset on her.
I think that,
and that's, you get that little flicker of that.
So from that point on,
and then you don't get anything else until the end of the film, and you have to wait, because don't click it off when it turns to black, because there's another shot.
So you have to kind of wrap your mind around the fact of or you can choose to wrap your mind around the fact that from that point, the whole rest of the film doesn't really happen. Tori has not left the white room when the film ends.
And it's kind of letting, the VR is letting her carry out this thought experiment
of, exactly.
Okay, and what if you push Barbara, and then you watch her. Where does that go?
Yes.
But she doesn't follow that. And then, but what if we go to the library and we could just be in the library?
But this library that we've never even seen. Who knows if Weathermore even has a library like that? It's
Right,
this is all stuff.
if you
Well, we could argue
if you
that
understand
Dr. Riley has created the
architecture,
program, so.
understand architecture,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I mean like understand it well,
Mhm.
I think people could point out all of that couldn't fit in there.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
Because some of the expanses of things, and the library in particular, it's massive. It's just massive.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get these shots where we really pull back and we can see the expanse of it. And I think in those moments, there are some people who are going to be like, wait a minute.
And admittedly, in this commentary, I said it's believable that what we see
Oh,
of
no, I think on the
Weathermore could
surface,
contain all of those things.
On the surface,
But
I
I mean,
absolutely
yes, I
agree.
agree
It's
with
believable.
Brianne. If-
Well, and also movie
Yeah.
magic.
Well, yes.
You know, we see
yeah.
stuff all the time where it's like, here's the exterior, now we're in the interior.
Yeah.
But if you're really paying attention, like the windows don't line up.
Right, exactly.
And like none of it actually makes sense.
Yeah.
But you know, that's like, you know, you're watching Fox, you're watching your favorite sitcom.
Right, yeah.
You know.
No, absolutely.
But we just kind of go, okay, that's what we're shown.
But what I find really fascinating about that particular twist in the film is that was really rooted out of a respect for good psychologists and psychiatrists, actually good ones.
Yeah.
Because we just kept chewing on that bone. Horrible pun, no pun intended there. We kept chewing on that idea because we're like, Dr. Riley would never let this get that out of hand. It just would not happen. It would not happen.
And I would also say that moment where, and I forget what it is, but there's something that ends up irritating Riley, and she starts to sound like Kaiser. She's like, fine, we'll skip a day.
Right.
And she snaps it shut to take it.
Yeah.
The VR headset box. And that was very Kaiser. Oh, you didn't do what I want. Fine, I'll take it away.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
take
gonna
it away.
punish
Take
you.
it.
Yeah.
But that's not Riley. That's not who we've seen so far. Where
Nope.
she asks Tori if she can come in, and then she sits down with her and she talks with her about Mr. Rogers. And
Yeah.
she is so kind and sweet. And like, and so that moment then that we see later on where she's just like, we'll skip a day.
Right.
That's not
cold.
Riley. That's Kaiser. So that's Tori seeing Kaiser in her.
Yeah. The idea of thought experiments bringing us somewhere essential and vital to healing is a theme that I revisit in a lot of different films. And interestingly enough, it is a incredibly similar theme in the other film where Kylie Moore plays a young version of a character played by Lana Sorensen,
Yeah.
House of Sound and Sea. But that film, literally the entire film is this thought experiment. But likewise, it's kind of like you blink, you miss it. In that film, not quite as literally as in this one. But it is something that I really like to talk about. Psychologically, it's something that I do. I will play out, if I'm worried about a scenario, I'll play it out in my head. Okay, if we go this way, if we go that way. Some people call that treeing, but whatever it is, to me, I really loved that twist in The Trees Have Names. So if you can imagine, then we jump from that second day where Brianne's, like you're saying, the flicker. And I always remember the flicker at the end, but I think it's because, of course, the powerful
That's why we
when
filmed the flicker.
Right. There we go.
Yeah.
Where we filmed the flicker, but then we come back, then Tori's life is going to begin from there, and it's going to begin more realistically. You know, she's going to be
with a police report.
Well, yes, absolutely, but you know, also like not just you have free reign. You know, someone would lose their mind.
Well,
you know,
and
she's going to have
see
the doctor right with her. It's going to be much more controlled, much more careful, so that Tori can hopefully have a life back in society again, if that's even possible at this point. But so that is like The Trees Have Names revealed.
Yeah,
I guess, you know. So that's kind of thing. Some of the other questions that people have asked after seeing the film is, who is Dr. Riley talking to when she's talking in the garden and Tori is eavesdropping, for lack of a better term? She can't really hear what she's saying. Yes,
Yeah.
spying. who is Frankie and why does Tori keep seeing him? And I mean, again, I can only answer those things, from my perspective, as our son would say, headcanon. My headcanon as the author is Dr. Riley's talking to her wife, and she's not like naming names or breaking patient confidentiality, but she's just like blowing off steam. Of course, that's not real though. So even though when I was writing dialogue for Stacy to say as she's talking on the phone, and giving her direction about who she's talking to and why, that really isn't happening. That's all in Tori's head. And the boy Frankie is a friend from little Tori's back at school, and the last victim that was taken by the serial killer, but also the only person who ever blamed John or accused John and actually brought those accusations or blame to young Tori. The question that we got both at the live premiere of the original cut of the film, and we've gotten it since, is how did an independent film studio with less than $1,000 budget for a feature film, how did you guys get that footage of the car crash and the police and all that, and those segments of when John's daughter and son-in-law are killed in the car accident? That was actually stock footage that was purchased, and we scoured every stock footage library database that we could find to literally match a stock footage actor that could pass for John at a distance. And that, I think, is what made that shot so incredibly believable, in addition to Brienne's incredible skills as an editor, splicing enough things together. I think as a personal note, the only other thing I wanted to add was, to this day, so again, years later, I find Faith's one scene as teen Tori, Faith is our daughter, almost impossible to watch. I just find it really especially brutal. I think, yes, because Faith is our daughter, but Faith is also an award-winning actress, and the idea that this young woman who has done nothing wrong has been abducted, for lack of a better term, by Kaiser, and is being so horribly treated and damaged even further. And just the oh my gosh, I can't even explain it. The emotional pain that she is obviously in, and the turmoil, and watching this very powerful adult figure horribly emotionally manipulate an innocent person, that scene is outrageous and powerful, and I do love it. That scene is also one of the trickiest scenes. There was something going on with our lighting or the camera. To be honest, I don't remember what it was, but we had a dickens of a time, and some of the shots could be fixed and some of them couldn't be. There's some noise, but that was as it is. But the thing about that scene were the moths. Moths had snuck into the room. Actual moths, drawn to this, the studio lights on these white on white walls and white on white ceiling and white on white floors. And Brienne had to digitally remove moths.
A lot of the frames were cropped.
Yeah. So that was very interesting. That was kind of a trippy little behind the scenes thing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, Brienne, that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
All right. Now, we do have kind of a surprise that we wanted to save and reveal just in this commentary. And we don't really have any dates or anything like that, but once the director's cut was done, Brienne came to me, and do you want to tell people what you've decided?
So what I had talked about is the possibility of doing a novelization of the film, or perhaps including it in a larger novel about Tori.
Mm-hmm. I just think that would be fantastic. I think it would be really amazing to explore some of these things, and I think it's a great story. And it had amazing actors, everyone.
Oh yeah.
Kylie sure can scream.
Yes.
And also is tireless and a perfectionist. And I've already given my opinion on Lana's performance as adult Tori, fantastic. Faith, difficult to even watch. I think really everyone across the board brought their A games. And we are talking some really long days, sometimes because scenes took extra time, or, when we're dealing with, actual kiddos that were getting in and out of kennels and, this kind of thing. And
it'd be an hour for 2 shots.
Exactly.
Which was nothing, no native about anybody.
No.
It's just for those, it was, we'd be doing like the primary filming, the principal filming, I believe is what people like to call it in the industry. And then when they were available, we'd have these families show up with these kiddos who were interested in being part of the film.
Yeah.
And being some of the kids that were in the cages. And so we'd stop all production.
Yep.
And then go into the garage, which is the real garage of that house.
Yeah.
And go down and we'd film 2 or 3 shots of them. One usually is what would make it into the film, but we wanted to have options and different angles and give them the chance to really show their range.
Yeah.
But that all said and done, and then, saying hi to everybody and wishing them off. And, it stopped production for a good hour and a half.
Mm-hmm. I remember there was one day, and it was like a 10 or 12-hour day, so a hugely long day, and Ashley, who plays Erin, was there to do just her dinner scenes at the table, where there's not even any dialogue that we hear, and she waited all day for us to get to those scenes, and we never made it to those scenes, and that was so hard for me and Brianne, because that's not how we like to run a set, and that was definitely a wake-up call. I think from that point on, after that film, we have scheduled completely differently, because that just was not acceptable to us. But I'm very pleased with the director's cut. I'm thrilled that you guys like the film, because if you are seeing this commentary, then you have purchased the film on DVD, because not in the Amazon description, the description on Amazon, and not at the description at Blueflix, nowhere can you find the link that takes you to this commentary, only if you have purchased the DVD. So this is an exclusive bonus feature just for folks who own the DVD. So thank you guys, and if you'd like to find other films by Blue Forge Films, please go to blueforgefilms.com. If you click Blueflix, you can instantly stream a whole bunch of our films. Or if you guys would rather have just some fun and free content, you can also go to blueforgefilms.com and click Blueflix Lite, where you can find all of our free content. But so thank you for listening, and the puppies say thank you too.